morning, and thank you for joining us here today. I'm Kathleen Ganley. I'm the Alberta NDP for Energy and Climate for oil and gas, natural gas, critical minerals, and hydrogen. And I'm joined here today by my fellow energy and climate critic, Nagwan Al-Guneid, who focuses on electricity, utilities, and renewables. I want to acknowledge that we are gathered here today on the traditional territory of the signatories to Treaty 7 and acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a deep connection and history with this land. We're here today to call for an independent investigation into power prices and ask the UCP to put limits on the amount of profits that a company can generate using something called economic withholding. This is where a company offers some power into the market at a price that they expect may be too high, and that higher price is higher than necessary to turn a profit, and that power doesn't necessarily get purchased, but it'll drive the overall price for power up. This is completely legal in our system, and it results from some companies having more control in the market. We first called for an investigation in spring during the election because it was becoming clear that we were seeing record prices at that time, as well as record profits. And it seems likely that the problem would only get worse. Now it has become dire. So first, a bit of history on how this mess was created. When the UCP formed government, power prices were just under 7 cents. Shortly after, prices started rising and increased nearly five-fold to a record high of 32 cents a kilowatt hour last summer. In Danielle Smith's first year in office, power prices doubled. The UCP has tried to blame these skyrocketing power prices on renewables or the coal phase-out, but that simply isn't true. The blame lies squarely with the UCP and government policies that keeps up more economic withholding. Economists at the UFC have concluded that high prices are due to power companies driving up prices in this way. And a few weeks ago, the Market Surveillance Administrator, or MSA, released a report backing this up. The Market Surveillance Administrator is a public agency that protects and promotes the fair, efficient, and openly competitive operation of Alberta's electricity and retail natural gas markets. The MSA concludes that the rise in power prices is due to a lack of competition and generators using their market power to drive electricity prices up. Economic withholding is allowed under the existing government rules, but without adequate competition in the market, it has gotten out of hand. According to the Market Surveillance Administrator, in the last quarter, power prices were 173% higher than the cost to produce electricity. These are massive margins for any industry, and it's only likely to get worse. In the MSA's latest report, they specifically named TransAlta and Heartland Generation as using this mechanism to impact electricity prices. Just a few weeks ago, TransAlta announced that it was purchasing Heartland. This will decrease competition and further increase market shares for this entity and control over prices. Enough is enough. Families are already struggling to make ends meet, while these companies generate record profits. This is government policy, and the government, the UCP, has a responsibility to fix it. Albertans are already facing massive costs for rent, for food, for insurance, and more. The UCP has done nothing to help, and from my vantage point, everything to make the problem worse. To speak more on this, I would like to turn things over to Nagwan.
Thank you, Kathleen. I should note that the Alberta Electricity System Operator is currently looking at market reforms. And while we think this is needed, we have serious concerns about the direction it is headed. What our market needs is either better regulation or more competition. Unfortunately, precisely when we need more entrants into the market, our premier is doing. In other words, while we need more competition, she's signaling her willingness to nationalize the sector, or at least parts of it. This will create investor uncertainty and meddle in Alberta's free market, which will result in driving away investment, limit energy supply, and will drive prices further up. Not to mention the sheer cost of this plan remains unknown. Smith has said she wants to de-risk projects that might fail in the private sector. But what that really means is allowing companies to profit from record high prices in the short term and make taxpayers pick up any risk in the long term. Essentially, the UCP is proposing a massive wealth transfer from Albertans to the companies already driving up the prices. Meanwhile, they've shut down the renewable sector. It has been so successful at attracting new competition into the province. It is well known that more renewable supplies would actually help lower prices by increasing competition and increasing low-cost energy supply in the market. In fact, the MSA's report states that, quote, as solar generation continues to increase in Alberta, it is having a larger impact on the market, including reducing the ability of larger suppliers to exercise market power, end quote. In other words, we need more renewable energy in order to increase competition and drive down prices. While the world is working on diversifying the energy mix to build reliable, affordable, low emissions electricity, something is lost on this government. It is working overtime to undermine renewables and driving up prices for Albertans already struggling to pay their power bill. There are solutions at hand, and we have asked this can-do government multiple times to start by proclaiming its own storage bill, which will allow utilities to own and operate storage assets to enhance reliability and affordability. Blocking modern solutions to create a modern electricity grid is short-sighted. It harms our economic future and makes things so much harder for families. We need an independent investigation into power prices. We need to get a full understanding of what is driving prices. Most importantly, we need solutions that will help Albertans during this difficult time and for generations to come. Thank you, and we're happy to take your questions.
All right, thank you, Nagwan. Thank you, Kathleen. We'll now go to questions and start with any questions in the room. With no questions in the room, we'll go to the phones. Just a reminder for those joining us on the phone to use the *9 function, and for those joining us on Zoom to use the raise hand function to get into the question queue. Our first question comes from David Staples from the Edmonton Journal. Go ahead, David. Your line is open.
Thank you for taking my question. My first question is, I just would like a greater explanation of the price mechanism that you're referencing, where they're bidding up. Like, how does this work in terms of the market, where you're bidding up some companies, sounds like they're bidding up the cost of electricity. How does that benefit them? How does this work to make a market mistake, I guess, that is harming consumers and helping the companies? What is the mechanism?
Yeah, thank you very much. So that's a really good question, actually. This one's a bit complicated. So the idea is essentially companies have a certain amount of power that they can sell into the market, and it essentially functions as an auction. So those companies are able to sort of say what price they're willing to sell for, and they set prices that are higher than cost plus a reasonable profit, shall we say. And because they have so much power in the market, because they hold so much market share, they're able to use that to kind of drive the prices up even higher. Now, ideally what happens is they sort of bid in their ideally from their perspective, not from everyone's perspective, they bid in their power and it gets purchased at that higher price. But because they have so much of the power, they can bid it in at different prices and essentially drive the prices up. Now, as Nagwan was saying, if there's more supply coming to the market, so things like renewables that tend to bid in a lot cheaper, that will drive the the prices back down again. So essentially what we have is like a lot of consolidation of the market in limited hands, and that gives them the power, economic power. Sorry, we're using power in two ways here, it makes it confusing. That gives them the ability to essentially bid up the price for electricity. Did you want to supplement?
Yeah, and David, the crux of the problem right now, we have limited supply in the market as well. We have a moratorium on renewables, which is blocking new supply, and that's low-cost energy supply to enter the market. It's also sending a terrible message to investors, so that's less projects down the road. So once you have more competition in the market, you have lower power prices. Like, this is a simple supply and demand process that we're seeing, and then you're having all these companies owning the biggest share in the market, and potentially 3 companies only owning that market share. So the problem can get dire with that market control.
Do you have a follow-up, David?
Okay, so is the problem essentially that there's just these limited number of companies and they're kind of price fixing, like they're one of them's bidding up, and the other ones who might bid lower than that are refusing to bid lower because it's in everyone's interest, power companies' interests, to not bid lower, or is it like they're bidding on supplying power, let's say when solar and wind can't compete, like let's say it's nighttime, and they're bidding for the sale of energy then, when you're not going to get that competition, so they know that they can bid the higher price. Is it the lack of competition, or is it a timing thing, or is it both?
You're bidding at the lowest, but the lowest is really high. So we saw in the summer it was 32 cents a kilowatt per hour compared to 7 cents. Like, the more you own, you actually control the market, and no matter how low you're bidding, you're forcing bidding at a high price, which is supposedly low, if that makes sense. So the solution is to allow more supply to enter the market. And then the other challenge is that you're having more companies now with the potential sale of Heartland to TransAlta is more consolidation of the market. And there is a legal limit to how much market share one company can control, and that limit is set at 30%. So a new company can control right now 29.6% of the market. So we're getting to that legal limit. So this is why we're asking the government to actually govern and to start protecting the consumers.
And we'll do one last pass for questions. Just a reminder, if you're on the phones, to use *9.